So, I've got a confession to make. While I've had a lot of success at my careers, the truth of the matter is that I've spent the last 8 years failing at 13 different business ideas. Now, most people would have given up at this point, but I'm not most people. Each failure was a stepping stone to reaching my goals, and today, I want to share with you every single thing I've learned in the last 8 years of business failure. Also, if you're interested, I have a companion video where I go into how much money I lost in each of these failed businesses. February 1st, 2016. My life was turned upside down with the birth of my daughter Emma. Something about seeing that little baby girl looking up at me just melted my heart. And I was determined to build a life where I could give my family everything I was capable of. In my search for answers, like most people, I ran across Tim Ferriss's best-selling book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and I was forever changed. I learned I had to build a business, so I took what I knew and decided to put it to work. My wife and I both had CAD experience, so the idea we came up with was to make printable paper templates for building furniture. These templates could be used to cut out wood to build furniture. Now, the problem we ran into was that even though it was a good idea, we had no idea how to build furniture, and truth be told, we both hated woodworking, so there was no passion behind it. Clearly, this idea didn't last very long, but we did learn from it. The key takeaway is that if you're going to pursue an idea, you need to have some level of passion for it. Now that's obvious, right? You don't have to eat, sleep, and breathe it, but you can't hate it like we did. If you can find something that you care about, well, that's going to make the work feel a lot less like, well, work. On my second read of the 4-Hour Workweek, I ran across the idea of licensing products. And the product development guru that Tim Ferriss mentioned was a successful inventor named Stephen Key. Stephen Key challenged the old ways of product development by bypassing the traditional methods and instead went for a cheaper, wide-cast approach. My first idea and prototype was a clothes hamper shaped like a shark. The idea was to encourage kids to put their dirty clothes in a clothes hamper by making the chore fun to do. I made a prototype and honestly it worked really well. My son loved it. I never got any further than that though, because at the time I wasn't very good at pitching the idea and I had a hard time figuring out which companies to even pitch it to. While I was working on that shark hamper, I was simultaneously working on an idea to keep book covers from sliding off of them while you read. You know, in hindsight, there wasn't a real huge demand for this idea, but hey, can you blame me? I was just excited to start inventing. Neither of these ideas worked out, but here's what I learned. I gained an understanding of the behind-the-scenes world of intellectual property and product licensing. If you have a product idea or have ever seen something and said to yourself, that was my idea, well, I encourage you to look into product licensing as a business model. I was far from done with this business and would revisit it down the road. More on that later. When you go down the rabbit hole of coming up with ways to make money online, you will inevitably run across selling products on Amazon. Essentially what you do is you find a generic or unbranded product and add your branding, logo, and packaging to make it appear as if it's your own unique product. My search for a product led me to a hot new product on the market called the Fidget Cube. And more research led me to what I believed was going to be the next big thing following the Fidget Cube, the Fidget Spinner. Initial sales were pretty good. I was well on my way to running out of my first order and I was prepared to order more. But before I had the chance to find out how far I could take this business, I was hit with the hard lesson of what it meant to violate the commandment of control. See, what had happened was, Amazon was in complete control and I had no way to stop it. They allowed customers to order my product and return them for a full refund while they kept half the product, essentially getting a fidget spinner for free. Amazon decided to shut my store down until I could prove that my product was good despite all the exploitive returns. And the final nail in the coffin was Amazon shut down all fidget spinner sales until we could prove that our spinners were deemed safe by using an independent testing company that we would have to pay for ourselves. Just like that, my fidget was dead. But I learned a lot. I learned how Amazon really works and how to coordinate with overseas suppliers. I learned how to work with freelance designers and that I should be more clear in my design intentions up front. I learned that I should be patient and seek out the designers that fit my criteria instead of going with the first person that reaches out or always going with the cheapest. But most importantly, I learned that trying to get rich quick with white label goods is a fool's errand if done incorrectly. I had a value proposition and I had positioned my product to be different, but I was chasing a trend with no long-term sustainability. And while it may sound like I learned the error of my ways, the reality of the situation is that it took an additional 2 failed businesses in rapid succession for me to finally figure out this lesson. What can I say? I'm a slow learner sometimes. Never being one to sit around and wait to make the next move, I immediately got to work on my next venture. Since Amazon had all the control, I figured I'd need to control my own product and website. But how could I own my own product without having to fork out the money for the product up front or have a large inventory to manage? If you guessed dropshipping, then you win the grand prize. There is no grand prize. If you're unfamiliar with this, dropshipping is a retail fulfillment method in which an online store doesn't keep the products it sells in stock. Instead, when a store sells a product, it purchases the item from a third party and has it shipped directly to the customer. Basically, all you have to do is set up an online store, find a supplier, drive traffic to the site, and when you make a sale, the supplier handles the rest. They prepare, package, and ship the product directly to the customer's address. You never have to physically handle the product, nor do you keep any inventory. Sounds like a dream, right? I sure thought so. Unfortunately, the negatives tend to outweigh the positives when it comes to dropshipping. First of all, you have zero control over the quality of the product. You also don't control the shipping speed or how the product is packaged. You know, it's hard to build up any brand recognition utilizing your packaging since it all looks so generic. But the biggest issue, hands down, is the competition. Setting up a dropshipping store is so easy that anyone can do it, and as a result, the competition is crazy. Everyone is out there fighting for scraps in the dropshipping world. Now, yes, I fully acknowledge that there are people out there who have made an absolute killing with dropshipping, but they are the exception to the rule. Yet again, I made the mistake of violating the commandment of control. I didn't own my product, and thus I was at the mercy of the suppliers. But most critically, I violated the commandment of entry. There is less competition where the road gets tougher, and in the world of dropshipping, the road is paved with gold. Unless it's raining, then walking on gold would be slippery and hard to do, I assume. The major lesson I learned from this failure is that the easy road doesn't lead to grand results. Unfortunately, my stupid caveman brain took this to mean that I just needed to put in more effort into this easy idea and thus would overcome the fierce competition. What could possibly go wrong with that? Print on demand is a lot like dropshipping, except the items are semi-custom tailored to the designer's needs. You do have many of the same issues as dropshipping, however, but that didn't deter me one bit. Why? Because I live in the South, and down here, people love their expensive preppy shirts. Yo, I ain't even gonna lie. I love this shirt. You're just going to have to deal with it. I'm going to wear it the rest of the B-roll for this segment, all right? Vineyard Vines, Southern Tide, Guy Harvey, Simply Southern, they all had their share of the pie, and it seemed like there was room for all. And with that, Crooked Letter Clothing Company was born. I gotta be honest with y'all, I still like the name. I came up with my own designs, but honestly, my heart really wasn't in it. I wasn't into this style of fashion, so it was a struggle to figure out what people were really into. Now, this one was a tough pill to swallow because with this failure, I finally realized my mistake of violating the commandments of entry and control. And I'm not gonna lie, this one held me down for a while. I didn't just bounce back from this one. After 6 failures in a row, anyone would start to feel pretty down on themselves. But time marches on, and I eventually put together the list of things I had learned from this failure. I learned how to use Procreate and Canva, which are both programs that became incredibly useful to me down the road. The foundation I set back then are still being built on to this day. I also learned how to spot trends and developed an eye for visually pleasing things. I immersed myself into the world of fashion and learned about an entirely new genre. You don't realize how limited your view of the world is until you step out of it and immerse yourself into someone else's. And of course, the biggest takeaway was that I didn't have anything unique to offer. But there was no time to further dwell on this one because immediately following this failure, I got my orders that I was getting deployed overseas, and any aspirations I had of obtaining my millions were gonna have to wait until I got home. Or at least that's what I thought. So earlier I mentioned that I was going to revisit this whole product development thing. Well, for whatever reason, I thought it would be a good idea to revisit product development while I was deployed. The mission wasn't overly demanding, and even though I was very busy, initially I had a lot of control over my schedule. This was the perfect time to buy a course and buckle down to make my inventing dreams come true. Oh, how naive I was. The primary issue I ran into was the lack of time due to the deployment. Shocker, I know. That was really dumb of me, and honestly, there's nothing stopping me from picking this one back up right now. I think this is a great method of generating sustainable income and highly recommend it to people. But really, the main reason I put this one down is because I learned something about myself. I realized that I'm the type of person who wants to take an active role in my journey of generating wealth. With product development, after you come up with the idea, generate the sales sheet, and then reach out to the companies, a lot of it is just sitting around and waiting for a response. I hate that. Yes, I could be working on other ideas, but I can only do so much while I'm waiting and hoping a company picks up my idea. I needed to find something that I could actively work on and feel like I could be making steady progress towards my goals. The type of work you do in your side hustle needs to match your style. If you need to be in constant motion like me, then find a side hustle that helps you to scratch that itch. So with that, on to the next idea. I'm sure plenty of y'all have heard of Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm not sure if he's as relevant now, but back around the early 2020s, he was everywhere, cussing up a storm and yelling at you to hustle your face off. And I ate it up. He started a flipping challenge where he challenged his viewers to get out there, buy stuff at garage sales, and flip it for cash. To say I rose to the occasion is an understatement. It actually worked out really well, initially. The idea was fun in theory, but in practice, I got burnt out on it pretty quick. The main lesson I learned doing this business is how supply and demand work. Sounds obvious, but there's more to it than you think. This business showed me that even though we feel like there is no room for us to break out into a crowded market, with a little outside of the box thinking, we could build a fortune in the most unlikely places. Now, this business isn't for me, but it could be for you. You could scale this one to as big as you want, but my heart just wasn't in it, so back to the drawing board. Now, you can't talk about wealth generation without discussing real estate. And the more I learned about real estate, the less I could make sense about making money from renting out single-family homes. This is what led me to raw land investing or land flipping. Now, this made sense to me. It's less risky, the prices are cheaper, the margins are higher, and it allowed me to put my background in pipeline engineering to use. So why don't more people do it? The answer is because it's not sexy. There are hundreds of YouTube channels and HGTV shows glorifying the process of fixing up and flipping homes. That's what people think of when they think real estate. But flipping dirt in the middle of nowhere? Where's the sex appeal in that? I settled on taking the Land Academy course and set about trying to buy my first piece of land. I eventually bought one, but I never did anything with it. Why? Because I was impatient, that's why. I quit because at the time, the math revealed that it would take me too much time just sitting around and waiting before I made any real money doing this. Are you seeing the pattern here? I was a very impatient person back then. I quit because I was so determined to find riches that if it felt like I was moving too slow, I'd abandon it and just move on to the next thing. I was so caught up in chasing wealth that I never stopped to think, is the problem with the business or is the problem with me? I had a lot of growing up to do. But there was no time to pontificate on that. I had riches to obtain, so on to the next idea. Now, I'm not sure exactly what triggered my brain to make the next move, but something within me said, you know what? Why don't you start a YouTube channel? Of course, you dummy. Make a YouTube channel. Well, I had just one problem. What the heck do I make my channel about? Up until this point, the only thing I was an expert in was failing at trying to build a business. So what brilliant idea did I settle on? I was going to exploit my wife, of course. So that was the play. My wife is a drop-dead gorgeous smoke show of a talented baker, and I knew how to run a camera and edit videos. It was genius. So I upgraded my cameras and we began to make ASMR-style cooking videos. We filmed several videos in this style, but never posted any of them. Neither one of us were enjoying the process very much, so we put it down and I moved on to the next thing. Now, as always, there's something to learn from all failure, and this is no different. If you're trying something new like YouTube, you can't expect perfection right out of the gate. But because I was demanding perfection with every single shot, I inadvertently turned my wife off to the idea of making YouTube videos. That one's on me, guys. You live and you learn. During the GameStop short squeeze in early 2021, a group of Reddit investors coordinated efforts to buy and hold shares of GameStop. As the stock price surged, some brokerage platforms, including the one I used, Robinhood, temporarily restricted users like me from buying additional shares of certain stocks. Maybe you can see where this is going. I bought into it and I lost all my money in the process. And since I'm dumb, I figured I'd try my hand at some other investments and I'm bleeding money there as well. So what did we learn? Well, first of all, I broke my number one rule, which is to avoid groupthink or herd mentality. If everyone is going one direction, my rule is to try and go a different direction. I know better than that, but all I saw were the dollars to be made and I wanted my piece of it. But really, the primary lesson I learned here was that I shouldn't jump headfirst into something as volatile as stock investing. I didn't fully understand how it works and what I was getting myself into. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't invest your money into the stock market. What I'm saying is that if you're going to do that, you should do your research, do some practice runs with little to no money involved, and then go big. So now that I've decided to walk away from stock market investing for the time being, I had to figure out what my next move was. With the pandemic in full swing, my wife and I decided to give YouTube another shot. We both had grown a lot since the last time and we were ready to go all out. It was actually going pretty well and had one video explode in popularity. Our shorts were doing pretty good and we even made plans to make a full-blown free baking course that was going to take several weeks to film from start to finish. Things were looking good, but then something happened. The day we decided to start filming the course, I turned the cameras on and I caught a look in my wife's eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was a look that made me feel uneasy, like something was wrong. I turned the cameras off and I said to her, "You don't want to do this anymore, do you?" Oh my gosh, she was devastated. She cried and told me she didn't like making videos anymore. She felt like she was letting me down by not pushing through. And in that moment, I learned something about myself. I realized that my family meant more to me than the pursuit of money. I told her that our marriage meant more to me than this channel did, and with that, Baker's Dozen was finished. This was the biggest lesson that I learned over the past 8 years and 13 failed attempts. But what immediately followed really helped push me forward. My wife said something to me that to this day drives every decision I've made until now.
What would happen if you just picked one thing and stuck with it? Stop bouncing around, just pick something and put all you've got into that.
So that's what I did. You guys, maybe you haven't noticed, but not once during Baker's Dozen did I get in front of the camera. I was just as afraid as my wife was. The difference is that my wife had the courage to get in front of that camera. She had the courage that I lacked. And if she could do it, why couldn't I? Guys, it was like a bolt of lightning just hit my brain. All at once, I was just flooded with the confidence that I needed to start this channel and share my message to the world. My life has been one gigantic, frantic mess. I've spent years pretending to be someone that I'm not. I've tried to please everyone, and in exchange, I was left behind and had to fight my way back and figure out who Nick Davis was. If I'd have to wrap this video up and put a bow on it, I'd say that the biggest takeaway is that you don't have to let failure hold you down. Keep pushing, keep innovating, keep failing. It's all part of the process. Don't be ashamed if it takes you longer than others to figure things out. As long as you learn something, your future self will thank you for your past mistakes. So, I've got a confession to make.